For instance, one example is what they've done with minimum wage. I mean, let's all just collectively ask ourselves. I mean, you don't hear anybody asking these questions. Anybody. I don't hear anybody I listen to a whole lot of different people out there. Okay, experts, mainstream media experts, all kinds of pundits out there. I hear them all, but I don't hear anybody asking just fundamental questions like, well, let's talk about minimum wage. And Bernie Sanders just throwing out numbers like they're 15. That's totally irresponsible. That's stupid. I mean, let's get into the mathematics of it. Okay, just that one subject. Let's just look at that one thing and see what they've done. You see, oppression is very important to God. He doesn't want his people oppressed. He wants the captive set free. That's all of us. We're all captive. If you are born with the cost of living, you were born captive. So let's see what they've done here. We came up with a minimum wage for a reason, right? To hold unscrupulous employers, masters, bosses to accountability so that they didn't take advantage over overly passive people and cheat them out of fair pay. In other words, enslave them, right? So it was some protection over slavery, legal slavery, because as long as you're paying somebody something, right, it could be chicken feed, right, which you could transfer into cash, right? Well, I gave him 5 cents worth of chicken feed, so here's a nickel. You know, you understand. So it just you wrap your mind around what I'm trying to say here. There was a rhyme and a reason why we came up with a basic universal minimum wage law, a federal law. And America was united under this umbrella, this federal umbrella, one nation, one law, right? And now we've broken down. I mean, heck, it's not only states have minimum wage laws, but communities have to have minimum wage laws. You see how they've balkanized us, how they've divided us here? Do you understand how this works? And people go along with it. I mean, how many people out there are inadvertently evil where you just don't think about these things because you've been cheating the farm workers for so long and you think, well, I want cheap food and I understand how this works. We need these illegal immigrants with no protections, labor protections, under the radar so that we can get cheap food. I don't want to have to pay more for food if I can cheat somebody out of fair pay. So all these people that would otherwise be noble, upright, good, decent people, and by all appearances, they're happy. I mean, they're well-heeled financially. This pseudo form of happiness is very dangerous. People are delusional under this. I feel very sorry for people that think they got it going on when they're rich toward the things of this world and they're poor toward God. That's a passage from Scripture. I paraphrase everything I quote from, but in a nutshell, that's it. You see, people think they got it going on because they're worldly wise successful and they made a lot of dough, but they're poor toward God and the values and concerns God has about them and their growth and ultimately their salvation, where they go from here. I mean, you've got to care about not just this little tiny, flash in the pan of time that we have here that's precarious, tenuous at best, right? One day at a time. We all know we could be dead tomorrow. And that's just the way it is. That's the status quo for all of us. So it's very insecure. So, I mean, how invested you want to be in this world and ignore that whole other world, the spiritual realm, that's going to get you to a better world. You understand why it's so important? This is what I do. I mean, this preaching and teaching, look, this is the most important thing I do by far. And thank God I don't want to get paid for what I do here. I do other things for money. Jesus Christ himself was out there as a carpenter earning money. Well, he did, raising the dead, healing all the sicknesses, the diseases of the infirm. I mean, this is what the man did. All this teaching and preaching he did, and then finally dying on the cross to prove God's love for us. Okay? That's how much he wanted to save us all. Okay? And then, and he was out there building houses for people as a carpenter. Right? So, yeah, I don't want to get paid for this. I know because the inclination is. That's why all these people in these churches, these giant churches and televangelists, they're out there making all this money, flying private jets. I mean, these people are going to be met with terrible, terrible complications on Judgment Day. I mean, these are the people, it's harder for a rich man to go to heaven than for a camel to fit through the eye of a needle. Those are the ones Jesus is talking to because they're using the name of God to justify what they do. They're playing on people's heartstrings, in other words. People get under the spell of thinking that somehow this preacher that they've invested their trust and faith in can get them to heaven, and if they just pay him this money that he's always telling them, it's, get rid of it, and it'll bless your own finances if you get rid of it, and you pay that tithe to me, and you give me. I mean, it's so sickening. It just, I just absolutely need to go the other direction. Okay, I need to go the other direction. And I'm just repulsed by money and the effect it has on people in this world. And God is repulsed. I firmly believe that you can get in tune with God's spirit and what he's saying to us and what he's thinking right here and now. We can all be miniature prophets of sorts because we have the spirit of truth. We have equal access to that. It's an umbilical cord to God. Anytime you want, you pray, God loves you. He's with you. He's helping you. He understands you like nobody else can understand you. Okay? He loves you in a way that nobody else can love you. And all the combined people that genuinely love you, they can't do it. That want to understand you, even therapists and psychiatrists, psychologists, counselors, pastors, friends, family. Nobody understands you and loves you the way that God does. So we need to, as individuals, lay it all down. I mean, he knows everything. We got to confess. I mean, why do we do the things we do? People have so many issues with their sexuality. Whose fault is this? I mean, there's a lot of people bandy about personal responsibility and all this, but what are the root drivers? What's causing us to want to sabotage our own happiness? Because that's what it does when we engage in behavior that dissipates time and it's vapid. It makes us feel empty. It's certainly not ideal, right? We all know it. I mean, this goes for men and women. We all have sexual issues. Nobody likes being single and feel like they're missing out on sex, right? So, I mean, men and women often, I mean, almost ubiquitously have engaged in pornography, for example, at some point or another. I mean, not necessarily hardcore. It's a lot of it's just, it should be normal. I mean, that we should be able to see each other naked all the time, but that ship has sailed at the fall of man and the original sin and knowledge of good and evil and the subsequent curse. All this bad stuff has happened, whatever that's a metaphor for, this forbidden fruit. Okay, but definitely had something to do with our bodies, right? So this is always something that we need to face as individuals. It is a factor in how we feel. Okay, and we could say, okay, I take personal, I'm just weak and I fell. Okay, but what are the drivers? What's causing us to want to, what I call metaphorically, slash our wrists, self-flagellate? If we know it's like insanity, and we know we've tried this before to make us happy, to be self-satisfied, and we can't do it, why do we keep doing it? Why do people engage in comfort foods? Okay, why do people gamble? Why do people use drugs? Why do people use alcohol? Why do people go out and get retail therapy? Okay, why do people have a whole host of different arenas to engage in forms of escapism? Because at the end of the day, that's what we're doing. We're trying to escape this repellent reality that's been shoved down our throats from birth. That's what I really believe is key to understand. So when you understand that there's a whole lot of room for forgiveness, for the mercy of God and his grace and all the good things that we all want and need, and that you just need to confess your sin, just admit it, then you be forgiven over and over and over. He told that parable about forgiving over and over and over when the disciples were quizzing him on, well, how many times? I mean, if our enemy sins against us and, before we condemn him and just have nothing more to do with him. And it was basically, you just keep doing it. You just don't ever give up on people. And this is what God does for us. And we need to do it with each other. And we need to do it with ourselves. It starts with doing it with ourselves, or otherwise we're not going to be able to forgive others if we can't forgive ourselves. And the first step to forgiving ourselves is to confess, to admit when we fall. So yes, I engaged in lust. It's true, and this is how it was. I mean, God already knows these things. You got to confess it. It's where you are at this point in your life. And it's certainly not ideal, because the only way to have sex ideally is within a good marriage. I mean, we all know that feels right, that sounds right, that is a ring of truth. Okay, yeah, that's right, that's exactly it. Yet look where we're at. I mean, even in marriages, even in church leadership, they're having problems with sexual addictions, pornography, and this stuff. These procreation drugs put in our God put in our body are very, 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 very powerful in our brain. The oxytocin, the testosterone, the the dopamine, the endorphins, the adrenaline, the cortisone. I mean, it goes on and on and on with drugs, feel good drugs. So you understand where it's logical that we would escape to this. And then you add on top of that that we're taught that it's healthy too. I mean, this is what they're teaching in colleges and university. You need to have plenty of sex, right? They infer this to be healthy, and they'll allude to the fact that, well, for men it's the prostate, but they can't really say it with any authority because experts disagree. The professionals disagree. That they say, well, no, in fact, men do not need sex to have a healthy prostate. So guys, you're on your own. It was because you're a wanker, and God knows it, and pretty much everybody else knows it. They say 90% of men admit it, and 10% of men lie about it, right? So you're not alone. And the gals do it too, and they're probably told the same thing. I don't know what in the inner circles of gynecologists' office or anything, what they tell women, but they'll probably tell them, look, it's healthy. I mean, you don't want problems down there. I mean, I'm not going to go into details. I'm not a woman, but it's their own darn business between them and their doctor and God, and that's it. And for men too. But we all have to admit when we feel it's not ideal, you've got to say it. God, you know me. You know me better than this. You know this is not what I want. But yet here I am. Okay, eyes filled with lust, and it's not right because it's written that you know that sin leads to death. Okay, this comes from the fall of man. This is when death entered the picture. You understand how this whole thing, it all is one big tapestry. And we've got to work our way out of Babylon. We've got to look at all the factors that are affecting our happiness, our well-being, and invite God into that picture. Okay, we've got to extricate ourselves out of Babylon. We've got to be our own best friend. Okay, we've got to make that our own personal decision to say, I don't want to be here anymore. I want to be clear-minded. I don't want to be confused. I don't want to be chopped liver to the top evildoers. I don't want to be automaton in this world. I don't want to have wrong values. I don't want to risk going to hell and having these people rule over me down there too, where they'd rather serve in hell than they'd rather rule in hell than serve in heaven. I don't want to be with those people. So it's very important. You see how all this big picture, and how you see I seem to go out on a lot of tangents, and I digress, and I get into a lot of subjects, and I conflate them all. But you see how it's all part and parcel. It's getting to the bottom of things. What are the drivers? What's making us want to escape? Okay, that's the big question. What's making us want to sabotage our own happiness, knowing that our spirit, our heart, mind, and soul, our essence, wants to soar with the eagles, but our flesh, our carnal body, keeps dragging us down. What is it? We want to beat ourselves up. Why aren't we happy? What is bugging us? God is willing to expose to you, reveal to you what's bugging you. And you'll no more be in darkness. You'll no more be in ignorance. You'll have allowed yourself to be extricated out of Babylon, out of confusion. You'll clear those muddy waters that have been muddied on purpose, okay, so that you could be taken, so that you could be duped, so that you could be led around by the nose, so crimes could be accomplished right under your nose. Like I digressed away from minimum wage, and pointing that out is just one area of those manifold areas we've been taken. But it's a crucial one because oppression is contrary to what God wants for his children, all of us. That's logical. That's reasonable for any good parent, any halfway good parent. Any crappy parent wants that for their kids. So he doesn't want anybody oppressed and taken advantage of. So there was a reason for a minimum wage law. Okay. And that is so that the passive workers in society couldn't be taken advantage of. And we all have to be workers. If you want to pay your cost of living, if you want to exist, you got to do something. Okay. There was a time, right, when there was no welfare available in America. So everybody had to be a worker or starve to death, I guess. So you were compelled. I mean, if you're not a slave, right, once the slaves were freed, emancipation and all that, right, then it was illegal to own slaves. Who a slave you had to provide room and board for. I mean, if you ask the average employer today, look, here's what this is going to cost you to have this minimum wage worker. Okay, he'll forego his minimum wage, but you got to take care of his expenses. You got to provide him room and board reasonable. You know, we don't want to be in sardine cans, right? So you got to provide a modicum of housing and food and potable water